If you haven't been downstairs yet, it smells delectable. Chili cook-off today, which means there is more than enough chili to feed all of you. If you didn't bring anything great, we didn't really need anything more. But we do need you to go downstairs and be hungry. So I will keep this short because it smells good downstairs. And you all need to stay here after church if you can to come downstairs and eat some chili, and so we don't have to take it home. I know I brought an Instant Pot full, and I would really like it to be empty when I go home so I don't have to deal with it because I'm tired of smelling chili after dealing with it for a couple days. So eat the chili. We want you to stay and eat with us and enjoy each other's company, and it really is a good time to just get to talk to each other. Sometimes it feels a bit like a shame that we get together once a week, sit in a room, and ignore each other. And we all know what we really want is just to have some time to catch up and to share life. So if this is the boring part where you have to ignore each other, then the good part is food and fellowship downstairs, and that is just as much worship as this is, just a different kind. So please do stay as long as you can, eat as much as you can, go back for seconds and thirds. I promise there's plenty, and it will be well worth it. You do probably want to plan a trip on the way home by Walgreens, CVS, somewhere to pick up some Tums so you can enjoy the rest of your evening too, but Tums are not included. I always think that we should include Tums by the desserts, just as a little bit of an after chili snack. Doug agrees. We'll do that next year, Doug, okay? Yep, the more advanced, right? That's the advanced dessert table. As we prepare to read from Hebrews chapter 7, I want us to reflect just a little bit more on this role of high priest in ancient Israel. We don't think this way. We haven't had to think in these terms for so long that it's absolutely foreign to us. The high priest was essential. This is the person who was a bit of it think of it like a conduit. The person who stands between the people and God, takes the word from God and gives it to the people, and has to put up with hearing all the words from the people and take those to God. That's not a role anybody volunteers for. Nobody wants that job. The high priest was the complaint department. The high priest was the one person who had to carry all the burdens of all the people to God and then had the responsibility of taking God's answer back to the people. And 9 times out of 10, that answer wasn't what they wanted to hear. This person was having to make sacrifices for their own sins and take care of their own self while they were also trying to take care of everyone else. But because each of these high priests throughout time were human, they were so limited by being human. They were weak. They got tired. They got angry. They got frustrated. They wanted to quit. They made mistakes. They made enough mistakes that by the time Jesus arrived on the scene, it was common practice for the high priest to tie a rope around their waist when they went into the Holy of Holies, just in case they accidentally bumped something they weren't supposed to touch and dropped dead. That way nobody else had to go in there and drag them out. They could just pull them out with the rope. That was job security. It was, maybe you'll die in there, who knows? They were human. They were mortal. And that role had to be passed on generation after generation until Jesus, this perfect, eternal high priest, who, unlike any before him, holds this priesthood that is unbreakable, everlasting, infallible, the leader we've always needed. His sacrifices were not temporary, but complete. In fact, he only had to make one. He's so efficient, securing for us a way to draw near to God with confidence. So as we listen to this text from Hebrews 7, I hope that we are reminded that Jesus continually intercedes for us. We don't think about a high priest often. You do, in fact, still have one. We just don't always think about it like that. He's still there. He's still offering compassion. He's still offering grace, steadfast love. He still is taking our complaints and our needs up the food chain. He's still taking that word of God and delivering it to us. That function still exists. We just don't usually use that language much. The word of the Lord from Hebrews chapter 7, verses 23 through 28. Furthermore, the former priests were many in number because they were prevented by death from continuing in office. But he holds his priesthood permanently because he continues forever. And consequently, he is able for all time to save those who approach God through him, because he always lives to make intercession for them. For it was fitting that we should have such a high priest, one who is holy, blameless, undefiled, separated from sinners, and exalted above the heavens. Unlike the other high priests, he has no need to offer sacrifices day after day, first for his own sins and then for those of the people. This he did once for all when he offered himself. For the law appoints as high priests humans who are subject to weakness, but the word of the oath, which came later than the law, appoints a son who has been made perfect forever. High priests were appointed by God to intercede for the people. The closest thing I think we have in that functional capacity these days is lawyers. I think that's similar. I'm not saying you lawyers should start tying ropes around your waist in case you actually die in front of the judge, but I think that maybe you should. I think that's the closest thing that we have to this function. But these priests, these human priests, they're still just one of us, aren't they? They might know the system, and they might have the jargon, and they might have the training, but they're still ultimately just one of us. Sometimes lawyers end up on trial too. Sometimes high priests go bad. The Jeremiah reading that works with us today with these texts, that was a time of Israel's history in which the high priests were corrupt. And that system became corrupted. And then what do? We definitely don't know anything about that. And they couldn't hold their position forever. Eventually they die. Every generation witnessed the death of one priest and the appointment of another. This constant turnover showed that human priests, no matter how sincere, how good at their job they were just unable to fully meet the needs of the people. They just couldn't provide that unbroken access to God. It was always just putting out fires or starting fires, as the case may be. This reality created an ongoing challenge for the people. And how could they feel secure in their connection to God if their access depended on imperfect mortal intermediaries? How could you really trust that the high priest was actually connecting you to God the right way, representing you correctly? What if he got his high priest degree from an unaccredited university? What if he's not actually allowed to practice high priestly functions in your district? That reality created this ongoing challenge for people. How could they have any confidence in the system? No priest could perfectly carry their burdens or offer eternal assurance. It was always, this will hold you until the next appeal. Every priest's service, no matter how faithful, was temporary, and their ministry limited by their humanity. The Israelites longed for this sense of security, this lasting peace with God. They wanted a permanent fix. They wanted to know they never had to come back to court. And the best they could get was, see you next year. They wanted to be not reliant on a system that failed, but they wanted something that could fully provide what they needed. Even the high priests, seen as the holiest of people, with exclusive access to the Holy of Holies, were reminded of their own sinfulness every day as they performed these sacrifices for themselves before they could even do their job. They had to remind themselves on a daily basis of what it would take for them to be worthy of the job they had. It was a limitation of these earthly priests that was unavoidable, unfixable. And it does mirror our own experiences, I think. We too tend to rely on the help that we have available to us to find peace, direction, comfort, only to find that our human solutions always fall short. I don't care how good your friend is or your family member or your support system, it can't do everything. Whether we turn to national leaders, and maybe we convince ourselves that if we vote for the right person this time, things will be better. And maybe they will, maybe they won't. But as long as that's the basket you put all your eggs into, some of the eggs will break. Or whether it's relationships or even your own abilities. Maybe you think that you can do it all on your own and you can guide yourself and support yourself. And sometimes, someday, you won't be able to. All of our sources always seem to fall short. In challenging times, we seek assurance from trusted mentors, comfort from loved ones, stability from structures like communities or workplaces. But as the Israelites saw with their priests, none of these fixes are ever everlasting. People age, situations change. Believe it or not, institutions make mistakes. Governments can't fix all your problems, no matter what they promise you, no matter how many vending machines they'll put up in the school hallways. They can't promise you everything and deliver all the promises. We just always find ourselves left feeling unanchored, unsatisfied, with our needs not quite met the way we always dreamed they would be. You ever get in the mail a personal handwritten note from a car dealership that's local to you, that knows what car you own, and they tell you, we'd love to buy your car, and this is the price we're willing to pay for it? Does that ever nod your heads? This happens occasionally to me. And all of us, at one point or another, probably the very first time we got one of those, went to the dealership and said, this sounds like a great deal, can you do this? And they said, oh, well, that's, for a car that's in perfect condition, and yours has these blemishes here, here, and here, so we can actually only offer you $10,000 less than that, which comes out to negative $500. You're going to have to pay them to take your car. That's what Hebrews is trying to say. That's that feeling of you trusted someone to provide for you what you needed, only to find out not only could they not, but now you had to provide for them. That feeling of instability and disappointment, it leads to a deeper awareness of our need for something, doesn't it? It points out that, gosh, I wish there was a car dealership that would just do what they said they were going to do. You want something unshakable, something you can depend upon, like permanently. Like you really do wish you could vote for someone who really would be capable of saying and doing all the things they say and do. Consider how we might even place a kind of spiritual or emotional dependence on those human systems that weren't designed to bear that weight. In a time of crisis, when we feel the need for direction, forgiveness, for peace, if you try to find that from a human solution, you're only going to find at best something temporary or partial. Those systems aren't built for that. And then often these sources of support can themselves be inconsistent. They have limitations, they make mistakes, they get tired, people don't always understand what we need. As we navigate these ups and downs, we are reminded repeatedly that our deepest needs are assurance, acceptance, hope. These require something more substantial, something more dense, something more reliable. Because if you put your hope into something shallow or weak, it just can't hold it. It cannot hold your hopes and dreams. So we are very much like the Israelites, longing for this lasting connection, something that doesn't falter, something that doesn't fade, this need for unwavering support. And it points us to the possibility of a priest, of all people, an intercessor, someone who is eternal, understanding, able to truly meet us where we are, who, if they send you mail with a promise, will keep the promise. And Hebrews gives us the good news that Jesus is exactly that high priest that we need. Someone who's perfect, someone who's eternal, someone who's compassionate. I say it before, I say it every time I use the word compassionate until all of us memorize this Latin vocabulary word. The word compassion is the most beautiful word in any language. It doesn't mean to feel bad for somebody. That's sympathy. Compassion means to choose to suffer with someone. Nobody does that. Nobody chooses to suffer with someone. That's rare. Your friends will show you sympathy, but a friend that chooses to suffer with you, that's really rare. Unlike the high priests of old who are limited by sin and death, Jesus holds this priesthood forever. He's not going anywhere. He's not going to get kicked out of office. There's no term limits. He's going to do this day in, day out, even when you're asleep, always and forever. He's holy, he's blameless, he's pure, he's set apart from everybody else. That means that his priestly role is not bound by human limitations. He lives to intercede for us, offering an unbroken, never-ending connection to God. The call will not drop, the Wi-Fi will not turn off, it never ends. The signal won't get weaker just because you end up in the wrong part of town doing something you're not supposed to do. It's always consistently there. And what sets Jesus apart is not only this perfection, but also this deep willingness for compassion. While these earthly priests offered sacrifices for their own sins and those of others, Jesus offers himself as this single, complete sacrifice. His own life and his own death and his own resurrection accomplished what no other sacrifice could, this once and for all atonement that makes a way for us to approach God confidently. No more tying ropes around our waist in case God's angry that day. Confidence that God is always ready to receive us. This is a grace that in its fullest sense, a priest whose care and commitment to us never change, who understands our struggles, and who bridges that gap between us and God. Moreover, Jesus doesn't merely represent us before God, he continually advocates for us. Aware of our human weaknesses because he was also one of us, sympathetic to our needs because he's been there, done that, his intercession is this compassionate, ongoing ministry. And it demonstrates to us, from the other end, God's unending love for us. Just as we bring things to Jesus constantly, God brings things to Jesus constantly to give to us. The complaints go up and the blessings come down. That tends to be how we sing the song, but it's more than that, right? We take our needs to Jesus, who brings them before God and advocates for us, but then God reminds Jesus to tell us, don't forget to tell them how much they're loved. It's covered. It's going to be okay. And I think we get a glimpse of this in Mark 10, don't we, with Bartimaeus? Just as Jesus reaches out to Bartimaeus in Mark 10, he reaches out to us, offering healing and hope. Jesus often asked people a question that on first glance seems rather obnoxious. Someone will come to Jesus with a crippled hand, and he'll look at the hand and say, wow, that looks miserable. What is it that you wanted? And we think that's harsh. Or he comes up to a blind man named Bartimaeus and says, what exactly did you want me to do about this? He knows what Bartimaeus wants. But he needs Bartimaeus to know it too. Because we're a fickle thing that we don't always understand what it is that we want. That's this high priestly function. Jesus is helping us figure it out, right? This priesthood is unique to Jesus. It gives us a new foundation where Jesus is our perfect high priest, and we, the people, are assured of a constant, compassionate access to a God who cares. And that is a promise that neither time nor weakness can alter. Because Jesus is our eternal high priest, we have a hope that reaches beyond any human solution or any temporary support or any election cycle. His compassionate and complete priesthood offers us what we all deeply need. Someone who finally understands it all, understands us fully, advocates for us when we have no voice of our own, when no one around here seems to listen, He brings this unceasingly secure way to access God. And in this world where things often feel so unstable, his priesthood is probably the only thing that is steady and unchanging, a foundation that we can build upon and rely on with confidence. And that means that unlike all your earthly relationships, unlike all the systems around you that may falter, that will falter, your connection with God through Jesus is unbreakable. We are no longer dependent on human intermediaries, no matter how much they tell you you are. We're no longer fearful that our access to God might be cut off, or we could somehow get lost. Because Jesus and his perfect sacrifice assures us that we are welcomed into God's presence, loved, accepted, and held in a grace that does not fade. So you can take that shame and that guilt and just leave it somewhere else. Just let it go. In worship and in our daily lives, we can live out this assurance. Jesus, as our compassionate high priest, invites us to approach God freely, bringing our needs and our fears. We're good at those, right? We're good at needs and fears, but also our hopes, our dreams. His constant intercession gives us strength, knowing that he understands our struggles and our desires, and he lifts those things up to the Father. That's why last week I asked you some specific questions about what it is that you dream for this church. What is it that you want? What are the things that you are passionate about that you would like to share with the other people in this room? So I promise to make this as least possibly awkward as I possibly can. And I know that's bad grammar, but I tried to put some superlatives in there that don't belong. During the chili cook-off, I'm going to make some rounds and say hi to you and ask you to vote for my chili. A little campaigning, last-minute campaign stops. But while I'm there, I do also want to hear these answers. Surprising no one, since I asked those questions last week, I've heard very little responses. I won't tell you how many because it's sad. But I know that you have hopes, and I know that you have dreams, and I know that God puts things in your heart about what this church could be in the future and what church can look like in the future. And so I do want to hear those things today. I'm not going to demand an answer, but I'm going to ask. So you have like 30 minutes to an hour to come up with something at the last minute. But it shouldn't be hard, because really all I'm asking you is one simple thing. What is it that you feel God is calling you to do within this church and with this church? To hope, to dream. And I know that's scary, because often when you take your hopes and dreams to someone, it doesn't go anywhere. But I'm not asking you to give them to me, I'm asking you to give them to God. Through that high priest. Not me. I'm not at that pay grade. There's only one, and it's not me. It's Jesus. And as we reflect on that perfect priesthood, we are encouraged to trust fully in his unchanging love, to let this assurance shape our lives and our future. We can approach God with confidence, knowing that we have this advocate who is both able and eager to help, who will hear the dreams that you have for the people in this place and say, that's wonderful, and take it up to God and say, you should hear about this. Let's do something with this. And you should also be confident that God is going to say, that's a great idea. Let me bless that. Let's do something with it. That is a reason for joy, for peace, for courage to live each day in the light of God's grace. And as we prepare to come to communion, to this table, we remember that Jesus, our eternal high priest, not only intercedes for us, but invites us to share in that life of his. Through his sacrifice, he bridged that distance between us and God. And in this meal, we experience that closeness that he offers. It's much more than an appetizer before chili. It's much more than a ritual. It's a reminder that Jesus' compassionate and complete priesthood, as a priest who knows us deeply, who took on our weakness, and who now lives to make intercession for us, is found in a moment like this meal. When we take this bread and this cup, we receive the grace and assurance that we are accepted, that we are loved. So as we come to the table, let's do so with grateful hearts, embracing the peace and hope that Jesus, our perfect high priest, provides for us not only then, but now and forever. Let's stand and sing.